Welcome to our first Thayer Talk. My name is Kelly O'Connor. I'm the head of collections and communications here for Ruby City. Uh, we are thrilled to partner with the Carver Community Center for this ongoing program where we get to engage with you and feature artists from our community and beyond. This program was inspired by our need to pivot our programming from being in person to a virtual format. So while the pandemic has provided many challenges, it has also given us the opportunity to get creative and come up with ideas such as Thayer Talks. Before we get started, just a little housekeeping. If you look in your upper right-hand corner, there's going to be an option to have a speaker view. And this way you'll get to see Barbara nice and large in her studio. So if you want to click that feature, it should be the ideal viewing screen. And the structure of this program, so we'll have about 35 minutes of discussion between Ernie and Barbara. And then at the end, we'll have time for a few questions. So please post your questions in the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. And now I'm very excited to introduce Barbara. So we were thrilled to feature Barbara Monaro today, who is not only an important artist in our community, but I also have the pleasure to work alongside Barbara here at Ruby City as our digital media coordinator. Barbara was born in Monterrey, Mexico, and graduated from the University of Texas at San Antonio. As an artist, she is influenced by and making a life between two cultures. Barbara's work explores ideas of the body and migration. Her soft sculptures, installations, and paintings utilize the tactile memory of clothing, the earth, and the physical body to express the emotional journey of immigration. She has exhibited at various galleries, including Sweetbriar College, South Texas College, Blue Star Contemporary, and Art Pace. Barbara also recently launched Breakfast Friend, a small batch hand-painted purse business out of her home studio here in San Antonio, which I'm really looking forward to her sharing more about this creative venture with us. And moderating today's conversation is Ernie Ramirez, who not only serves as the Cultural Center Supervisor for the City of San Antonio at the Carver, but is also responsible for coming up with the idea of this program here today. He is a former educator and previously served as the director of the Northeast School of the Arts. When he's not involved in promoting local arts events in our community, he enjoys podcasting and spending time with his wife and 3 children. Now I'd like to turn it over to Ernie and Barbara.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kelly. I appreciate that welcome. Very warm, and I'm just very excited about this collaboration in general. It was just kind of, I guess, meant to be when somehow we ran into each other and started spitballing this idea of a studio artist tour, an artist studio tour. And you guys have been more than accommodating and looking forward to further projects down the road with these Thayer Talks. And again, like Kelly said, we are here to amplify creative voices, and we want to give you that insider's look into working artist workspaces. And this is kind of a unique way for us to be able to go into someone else's space and see what it looks like, what their process is like, what they're working on, and those sort of things. And so very excited for Thayer Talk, however you'd like to say it. My poor grandmother it would probably be rolling around in her grave if I didn't say Thayer Talk the proper way. And so this is Thayer Talk. And that being said, very happy to introduce Barbara Millaro, since we're all about pronouncing things correctly. And Barbara is our first ever guest for Thayer Talk. Welcome, Barbara.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for your introduction and Kelly's. I'm very excited to be the first artist featured in this awesome partnership. Yeah, I'm just really happy to be here.
Yeah, awesome. Well, we did lose a little bit of time, so we'll just jump right into the questions. Barbara, how did you begin your work as an artist?
I I don't, I've, I don't think there was like a specific moment where I decided like, oh, I'm an artist. I feel like I just grew up in a very creative environment since I was younger. I lived in the next door to my grandparents, and they always really like pushed us to be creative. We were always drawing, making plays. With my cousins, we were just like playing and just drawing. So I feel like I always thought of myself as creative because everyone around me was creative. But I think it was until I was in college where I felt like I was an artist because I was studying art. But I mean, I do have to say that I don't think you have to study art, like have a degree in art to call yourself an artist. I just, I guess that was the first time where I was like, okay, I'm an artist. I am having exhibitions or being part of exhibitions, and that's maybe the first time that I felt confident saying that I was an artist. But again, I don't think that you have to show or go to school, art school, to call yourself an artist.
So back then, when you were in those younger days, what's the earliest age you remember, getting into the supplies and making stuff?
Yeah. So actually, here's a picture of me. I don't remember when this was taken. Of course, I was pretty young, but my mom shared it with me recently. And I guess that was like my first art show at school when I was living in Mexico.
Cool.
And I just love this little drawing that from my English class in Mexico, that like my favorite activity was drawing. And I don't draw as much, but it's still very, I mean, art's still like very present in my life. My grandpa, he's an architect and an urbanist, and he would always give us like scrap sheets of paper, recycled paper, and on the back side there were all these like architectural drawings or architectural notes, and then on the other side we would all like draw. And I think that's also when my fascination and my importance for recycling and reusing things started, because I always grew up like how can we use this item to its fullest, like before throwing it out. So I mean, that we'll talk more about that in my work and you'll see why I'm saying this. But now that I'm like sharing this, I'm like, oh my God, I always been into like reusing and recycling. So
Yeah, and I see, your mediums, crayons, paints, finger paints, probably paper. Yeah, that's all you really needed to get started.
yeah, I feel like everyone, that's like the first medium that you enter into the arts, like through drawing or painting. I
Yeah,
think.
I'm still at that stage.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about your practice in general? Like, talk about maybe your subjects and things that you're used to working with.
Yeah. So I would say that my work works within three bigger themes, which is the theme of home, the body, and a body in migration. I started as a painter, and I from there I kind of just went with clothing and reclaiming clothing that was mine, or my grandma's, my sister, my mother, close friends. And I just, here's a picture of how I kind of transformed like that shirt that was from my dad into this weaving, how my friends helping me cut the fabric, and that's a picture of an installation, so you can see the messy part that you don't see, all the clothing piles and just installing.
Very cool, very cool. And so something just stuck with fabric, I guess. It seems like that's kind of, your what you're most known for, at least lately, and I know you'll get into that a little bit more, but this is like fabric overload over here, and I'm getting got so many questions as to, why and what kind and how do you decide and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and it truly was a process. It wasn't just like, oh, I want to work with fabric, here I am. Like in undergrad, my major was in painting. I was always painting. And then towards my last semester, or like last year, I started with my paintings, but they all started having a lot of texture, and not so much from like oil paint, but from other objects. I would make like these like limb-like fabric. And I think I have a slide on slide 5. So those are my paintings, the ones that I started with. And then the next one, you can see how I started with fibers and just like little fabric here and there, how my paintings became very heavily textured and three-dimensional. So my last semester I was like, well, maybe my paintings are kind of telling me something. I feel like many times our work also communicates ideas, and it's kind of like talking back at us. And you have to listen to it, because sometimes you can't force your work to go a certain way if while you're working it's showing you something else. So it was showing me to go into a more three-dimensional aspect. So that's when I moved to 3D work, to fabric work that was not 2D, but like a sculpture that became more like bodies, because that's also, I feel like my interest and the things that I was working with, the material had to change. Like if I wanted to represent the body, how would I do that? And I don't know, I just like gravitated towards clothing, and clothing that was used because that was literally used on a body. So
Right.
yeah.
And so are these that we're looking at right now, are these some of the first representations of that transition from painting into fabric?
Yeah, and this was undergrad, and that was like, yeah, my first steps. The next slide, it's actually my first fabric sculpture or fiber sculpture, and that was in my thesis show. So after that, I just continued with fabric. But in that one, I had some clothing, but it was mostly old fabric that I had, old bed sheets, old blankets that my mom had stored away that I was reusing. Some were like dyed, and they were altered, but they were not necessarily clothing, just a few items from there.
Very cool. Now, that being said, can you tell us a little bit about how culture and your own personal background influenced your work and your methods?
Yeah, so I feel like my personal background is really present as to why I am using these fabrics. I guess me and my mom were a bit, I would say, like hoarderish. We like save things up, we like stored them away. And I remember when we moved from Mexico to the US, she had all this clothing, blankets, bed sheets, like random things that were just stored away. And then I said, like when I started doing my sculptures, I started using them. So I just really saw like my use of fabric. It was like that I had back then to the now was like kind of like abstracting like my background. It was like it carried my background through the fabric, and the way I abstracted these fabrics and transformed them into something else, it was kind of like a representation of how like my culture, language, body conforms to these new environments. Like again, going back to like immigration, how like you immigrate somewhere else, so you have to adapt to the space, or are made to assimilate and are made to change to that new space.
Very cool. And then I guess specifically, why reclaimed? And I know you kind of touched on it, but is there a particular reason why the reclaimed aspect is more important?
Yeah, I guess I like, for a second, I was like questioning. I mean, I guess we all have like those questions, like, where am I from? If I've lived half of my life in Mexico and half of my life in the US, I don't feel, I've always said like I am too Mexican for the Americans, too American for the Mexicans, like filling in between. I was like, then I came to my own conclusion, like that my body was my home, not so much my geographical location. So it didn't really matter where I was, but where my body was, that's where I decided I was from or belonged. So I don't know, I was like, and how do you, if my body is my shelter, my home, how do I shelter it, or how do I take care of it? How do I adorn it? Through clothing. So that's why it just felt very natural to use that, to use clothing, especially clothing that was mine. I also use clothing that, like I said, that was my mom's, my sister, grandma, close friends, mostly women. I would say only women. I've used like my dad some, like once or twice, and I feel like a couple of male friends too. But I always gravitate towards women because I don't know, I just like love like relationships between women, friendships, just like I grew up around a lot of girl cousins. I have a lot of like good girlfriends. I just like really like the womanhood and the support system that women give each other. So that's why it's also important. And also I feel like in the back of my head, I also like the recycling aspect and like transforming something that would be discarded to make something new, make it a new product.
Well, in this particular piece, I'm really drawn to that natural wood base, and I'm very curious to know, what other elements aside from the fabrics and all the things that tie them together do you incorporate in your work?
Yeah, I actually don't really, that's like one of the few pieces that I use something outside of fabric or reclaimed clothing. That tree trunk has a interesting story that there was a tree at my parents' house in McAllen that there was something happened, but it died. So it had just fallen, and they were gonna pick it up. And for some reason, me and my grandpa he was visiting from Monterrey, and we were in the backyard, and he started telling me that tree was a tree that was sacred to the Mayan people. And the reason that it was sacred to them was because as it grew, it didn't have the rings to tell its age, but it would hollow out. And they saw it as a connection between the underworld, the human world, and the heavens, or however they call it. So I really like that. So I kind of like thought, a lot of my work is biographical. So I kind of thought of me as being this connector between like my Mexican side and my US or my Texan side, and just like that pathway, also like immigration, how there's like constant migration. It's just like a tunnel, like a connection. So that's why I used it there. That's one of the few that's a sculpture, but one of the few fiber sculptures that I use something other than fabric. There's another one that I had my shoes from when I was in Mexico, that my last day, my little friends signed them before I left to the US. And that's one of the other things that my mom saved and I got to use in one of my sculptures. But other than that, I almost always stick to fiber.
Okay, and that you had mentioned that was somewhere around college when you started this transition, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so we know where you started, and we kind of know where you morphed. I mean, are you still into painting and photography and some of the other things that kind of ignited this passion for you?
Yeah, I would say that just since fiber work is so time intensive, I kind of abandoned painting and photography until recently, until we started quarantining. I started painting a lot more. I think I slowed down a bit with like going out or just seeing people. I had to stay home. So during this time, I feel like I went back to a lot of my likes from back then. So I started painting. Photography, I honestly don't do that much, just because I really love film photography and I don't have the equipment to develop film. I do take pictures with my film camera, but they're just stored away. And like I said, more recently, I've been painting, especially with my new project, the Breakfast Friend project. But
save the details on Breakfast Friend. I'm really interested in hearing about that towards the end of the.
Yeah, just a little teaser.
Yeah, a little hint. Okay, so probably, and I'm just assuming, just like me, a lot of other people are probably wondering, So what does your creative process look like? You know, when you get an idea for something, especially like this piece that we're looking at here, do you start with a vision? Is this something that you would have, you know, maybe sketched out on paper first? Is it intuitive for you?
Yeah, it all depends. I always have a small notebook with me where if an idea pops in my head, I'll either draw it out, write it down. But I feel like I begin with more abstract ideas. I don't like, I know what I want to convey, but and then the form comes after. Or if there's like a certain piece of clothing that I really want to work with, then that's my starting point to create what I want to create. But I would say, like, for example, this piece, this installation was site specific. So, and a lot of my work is site specific. So I kind of decide what I'm gonna do once I know the space. Although I feel like my installations are very adaptable to different spaces. I mean, going back to immigration and adapting to spaces, I think that's a layer that's in my work that I made in a way where it can adapt to different locations or architectural forms.
Gotcha. And so I guess what I'm curious to know is, are there any rules? Do you live by, you know, when you're starting to design a collection or an installation, you know, are there any rules to how this looks in your mind, or what needs to happen, or is it just you kind of know it when you know it?
I say that there are more like formal ones as far as like color, but I think I do them unconsciously. I really like things that are very colorful, and that through the color there's also movement. I feel like that's just something that I gravitate towards too. But I don't think I have any strict rules. I think I'm pretty flexible, or if I do set a rule for myself, I probably break it during the installation and just
Yeah,
change my mind. I just try to adapt.
the best artists always break rules, right?
Something like that.
Oh, very cool. Well, I'm very curious to know, is there a particular collection, piece, installation, something that is your absolute most favorite that you've ever created?
Yeah, so it's on slide 10, Kelly. And it's this piece I got to install at Sala Diaz, which is a local gallery here in San Antonio. This is one of the moments that I've been most proud of myself, because again, going back to my little sketchbook, little notebook that I carry with me, this idea before creating it, I had it for 3 years. Like, I knew that I wanted to create this architectural form, referencing the border wall, a wall, just like something that would impede your access through a space. That I knew, like, I wanted to do that. I just, sometimes you want something, and like you have an idea for like an installation, especially like an installation, you have an idea, but sometimes you don't have the space or the resources. But when I was invited to participate in this group show in Sala Diaz, I was like, oh my God, I can finally do this wall piece that I have thinking about for so long. And if you see closely, maybe in the next slide, we can appreciate it more. It's, I cut up newspapers into strips and then started weaving them. And these newspapers, they're from Monterrey, my hometown, McAllen, the Valley, where I grew up, and then San Antonio, where I live now as an adult. And just, I was really interested how the news and like the media portrayed different things, and how it was portrayed in different places, and if the same news were shown, or how were they talked about, like depending on the location. And so I don't know, I was just like interested in that. So I started weaving those 3 locations, and then they're pretty close to each other. So a lot of the news were overlapping, some were not, some, I don't know, it just, so I started weaving those stories together. But one of the other reason that I really love this piece is because, as you can see in the middle picture, my cousin, and not just my cousin, but just like her family, her parents, my grandma and my dad and sister, I visited home. They were all helping me weave the newspaper. So it was like a family effort, and I just really like the support and just like the conversations we were having while doing that, and just like being together. And in the next slide, my dad even drove from McAllen to San Antonio to help me install. So I don't know, it's like my favorite, that for many reasons, that it was something that I had thought about for 3 years, and then I did it, and then to have my family help me, and I don't know, it's just.
Well, yeah, we can see, exactly now why it was so special. And how long did it take to complete this piece?
Oh, so long. I would say that I did 70% of the weaving, and then the other 30% my family helped me. I don't know, it like 4 weeks nonstop. It was a lot. I don't remember.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was.
And where's the piece now?
So actually, I'm looking at it right now. It's
Oh,
all folded up, because it was like it became also like a big newspaper sheet. So I just folded it up, and it's here in my studio. But I had to sell the wood, and I mean, I don't know if I'll ever get to install it again, but I just really love the feeling of feeling small next to that piece, even though it was so fragile, the newspaper. And yeah, it was, I think, like around 9 feet tall, and then like 15 to 20 wide. So yeah, it was pretty big.
awesome. Well, yeah, thank you so much for sharing that story with us. I'm going to shift gears a little bit here and talk about your latest project. Is that another picture? Okay, yeah, here's your latest project. I'm very excited to learn more about Breakfast Friend. I think I have a pretty good idea of what it's like. I've been seeing some of these pieces come out and look very exciting. Yeah, I don't have one myself, but I could see my wife or my daughter whether I was one of these. But tell us a little bit more about what is Breakfast Friend and what are we looking at here?
Yeah. So I started Breakfast Friend maybe like a month and a half ago. Uh, it's my purse collection. I get purses either from my personal collection, vintage, or some that I've bought, and I paint on them. It's my business, but it's also a way of I don't know, like wearable art, like sharing the art and making it more accessible. I actually, when I was younger, I wanted to be a fashion designer. So it's funny that I'm like, now I have my bag line. A lot of the illustrations are inspired by like my border, growing up in the border, or like living in San Antonio, which is pretty bicultural. There's like pan dulce, and then there's like fruit and like things that I don't know, that I carry in my purse, and just like inspired by friends, like what they carry in their purse. But yeah, it started during quarantine. It's something that I've been wanting to do since I was a teenager. I've always wanted to have my product line of some sort. And at a point, I had an online store with my sister and another friend, but just we didn't follow through. I mean, we were in school, we were younger, and I feel like now I really took the jump. And
The timing was right.
yes.
Maybe it was just time. It was just time for you to do it. And so where did the name Breakfast Friend come from?
So I don't know why. I mean, it's because I've had that name. I had like an Instagram account since I was in college that I never used with that name. It was Breakfast Friend. And I'm not sure how it happened, but at the moment, and I still think this, but I always think that your true friends are the ones you have breakfast with, the ones that you like want to start your day with, the ones that like uplift you. And just, I don't know, and I love breakfast. I feel like a time of sharing. I just love meals, just like sharing, talking. There's this word in Spanish is sobremesa, and so it's like after you finish the meal and then you just stay there and talk for hours and maybe have coffee or something. Like that's my favorite, and I feel like at breakfast with friends that usually happens. And I just thought, like, what better way but to name my purse line that way, because your purse, you have it with you all the time and you carry your daily essentials. So
How cool is that you've been hanging on to that name for so long and really not even knowing, what the end result or end product would be like. And I think it's a very cool and creative line that you've got out. I kind of am in the same vein. I think you and we've had conversations about food before. I think there's, like, you're right, there's just so much that can be shared between, a close group of friends and, this delicious meal. And I think you summed it up nicely with this line. One thing that I will note is that, don't forget about your breakfast bros or your brunch bros. I don't know. You're the artist. I'm not going to tell you how to do it, but I could totally see myself rocking a breakfast friend wallet or a breakfast friend shirt, stickers. I would love to own a piece of this and be able to show it off. So that in mind. And remember,
yeah,
you heard that idea from first.
I do want to expand, but I hope men feel comfortable carrying a purse. I think my purses, I think I mean, I don't think they're gendered. I know they're pastel, but I hope men carry my purses too.
I'm a
But yeah,
minimalist. I carry a wallet, but
but yeah, I do want to expand in my products. I don't know, one thing at a time.
I get it. Cool. And
Thank you.
yeah, maybe more ideas once you sit down at the table with some friends again.
Yeah, but I also want to add that I love what happens around food. Yes, the conversations, but also just like the history that food carries and how it's shared and how we get all these like new like food fusions. And I feel like it talks about the globalism and immigration that's happening around the world, which I also really appreciate.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable now. You can literally walk into any local restaurant or local grocery shop and find a meal or a concept of a meal that comes from almost every corner of the globe. So I think you're onto something here, and I look forward to seeing with what other kind of breakfast friend things that you've got. You just had another drop today, didn't you?
I did. I think there's still a few bags up for grabs. Just putting it out there.
Nice.
Yeah.
And how can people find Breakfast Friend? Where are you?
So and on Instagram I'm just at breakfast friend, and on that's for my brand, and then for my personal one is just my first name last name Barbara Minarro without the ñ. And yeah, I'm pretty active on social media.
Yeah, so if you guys aren't already following Barbara now or Breakfast Friend, please, as soon as we wrap things up here, we'd love for you to start following her and, getting in the loop with, the next big Breakfast Friend drop and any other projects that you've got coming up. Before we open up to other questions, I guess I kind of want to wrap up my own questioning. What other passions, what other aspirations do you have as an artist or beyond?
Yeah, Kelly, can you go to the next slide? So I like to bake. I grew up around chefs and pastry chefs, so I didn't really get to experiment until recently because they would always bake and cook for me, so I really didn't have the need to. But I feel like until maybe 2 years ago till present, I started baking a lot. And one of my most proud creations were these cookies. I mean, they're raw right there, but flour pressed sugar cookies. Then I also started making my own clothing. I'm still not that good at it. I'm still learning. But it's also one of my passions, just to like make the clothing that I wear. And then roller skating roller skating. That's something that I'm like dipping my toes into. When I was younger, I used to ice skate, but when I was really young. So, and I still, whenever I go to an ice rink, I still feel like my muscle memory is still there to do a certain thing. So I'm hoping that translates to rollerblading.
So it's not like a roller derby. You're not like getting rough and knocking other people down, anything like that.
I mean, it might be fun, but no, I'm not there yet.
And then quick question about the cookies now. I see that they're pressed flowers, but are those edible? Are they completely edible?
Yeah, they're edible. Yes.
Very
yeah,
cool.
I got them to be edible.
Yeah, I mean, I've never seen anything quite like that, and would like to eat them if you make it. Yes. Okay, so I guess I just have one last question for you. What are some of the most important lessons, or at least what's one important lesson that you learned throughout this entire journey as an artist?
I would say photograph your work and keep a portfolio in your computer, because when you're applying to grants or shows or just your website, you want to have those pictures. I don't know how many times I've kicked myself for not taking pictures of my work or not taking good pictures. So I think that's one advice that I would give out. Also, thank you notes go a long way.
Handwritten.
Yes, handwritten. Yes.
From the heart.
Exactly.
I'm learning that too. Yeah. Well, that was so awesome. Thank you so much for giving us a little insight, a little peek into your life, your workshop, your workspace, your studio, your pieces, everything that you've been working on. Excited to see where Breakfast Friend goes from here. I just think that you got so many different ideas. Like I can just see the wheel turning inside of your brain, and thinking about, okay, what's the next thing that you're going to focus on and run with. So Barbara, thank you so much. Before we leave, I want to make sure that everyone who's here with us today knows that they're able to leave a question or ask a question in the Q&A down below. Kelly will help field some of those questions for us. But if you guys have something you'd like to ask Barbara, by all means, please ask, and Kelly will maybe help us with that question.
Sure. Barbara, do you want to show us your video first? Or?
Yeah, that's
okay.
what I wanted to add. Yes.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I forgot when.
Share my screen. Okay. So here's a preview of my studio. Just really quickly, it's one of the spare bedrooms in my house, and this is where I currently work from home. I have all my Breakfast Friend bags. These were from this drop, and they're in my background if you guys didn't see them. Yeah, and then I have my sewing machine and my serger, which are my best friends, and just my computer. And I know it might look messy to you all, but this is pretty clean for me. That's how I work. I just have a lot of materials, brushes, paint, all these types of glues, yarn. I can never have enough of that. Beads that I use for my my bag line, but also for my personal art. Or not personal, but just like my art. And then all my yarn, and just I try to stay organized, because then if not, I'll buy more than I need to. Then my apron, and then unfinished paintings that I have on my wall, so they like pressure me to finish them. But yeah, that's my home studio. I never really get to show it.
Oh, cool. Well, don't think that it's messy or disorganized because it's yours. And if you know where everything is, then that's all that matters.
Yeah, and I think I work well in chaos. I mean, clean, but there's still a lot of things.
Control chaos.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing that video for us.
So we have some questions coming in. Elizabeth asks, what other artists do you draw inspiration from? And love the cute picture of the puppy with the purse, which Barbara and I talked about recently. So Barbara, you'll have to give us some insight to that classic meme.
Yeah. I'll begin with the picture of the dog. That's so funny because he or she's a famous dog on Instagram. So I just photoshopped a little purse in her mouth, and a lot of people thought it was real, which I felt really proud of my photoshopping skills.
That was a really good job. I totally was like, how did you get that dog to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I wish, but yeah, that was so funny. But thank you, Elizabeth. And artists, I feel like I really like Eva Hesse just because of her usage of materials. Doris Salcedo, also materials. I really love what she is in the Ruby City collection.
Mm-hmm.
I also really like Janine Antoni, and I feel like the artists that I gravitate towards, and not so much because we work in the same themes, it's just I really like their usage of materials. So I think, I mean, there's many more, but I would say like they are some of my favorite artists.
Nice.
Yeah.
So Angie asks, is there another subject you would be interested in transmitting through your art? And I want to push that question a little further. Are there any other mediums you haven't explored that you are interested in, but maybe just haven't made that leap?
So, first the themes. I don't know. I feel like I always gravitate to the things that I'm living through, or like our contemporary issues. I feel like that's what really inspires me. I was really like into immigration, but right now I do feel myself transitioning more into like border life, and just me living in the valley for so long. It just like it really has feed into my themes of like of interest. So right now I'm really studying, like there's a checkpoint, and just like really studying that, and when did it begin, and just that really interests me. And as far as materials, I don't know. I love Fiverr, but I do see myself wanting to like step away from that and do something different. But I feel like I'm just so addicted to Fiverr. But right now, I did buy a lot of plastic beads, as you could see in my video, and I wanna expand that. I was doing these like weavings, but they take forever. So I don't know. I want to see how I can work with plastic beads a little further. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing with textiles and fiber. It is a slow process. You really have to dedicate a lot of time to it.
Yeah.
But you talked quickly through that checkpoint. So what you're saying is you were curious about the border control checkpoint between McAllen and San Antonio.
Yeah.
And when that was implemented, that is a very interesting idea to explore. I hadn't even thought about that, but what is the history of that? Right. When did they implement it? That would be interesting to learn more about.
And that's something I have been studying for the last 2 years, but I feel like my research is really slow, and I don't know, I don't want to just do something like an artwork about a certain subject and then move on. So it's something that I'm like slowly picking at it. But yeah, I'm really interested in what happens in that 100-mile radius as you come in. So yeah.
Yeah. So is research like a central part of your process, or is that just mainly for your like installation based works, or is it for all your works?
Yeah, I would say it's mainly for my installation. But I actually forgot to say that. But yeah, I do a lot of research. it doesn't have to do with any artist. It's more like politics and like policies and just like other things. But yeah, no, research is very essential for my practice. Good question.
Well, nice. Well, we don't have any other questions unless y'all have any final thoughts you want to say.
I just want to say thanks again. I mean, this was a true kind of building the ship as we fly sort of thing. First time we ever attempted something like this, and now we know certain aspects that need some work, connecting to Facebook. So we're gonna do what we can to take this recorded session and share it out on social media after we finish here, after we wrap up, since we couldn't do it live, but we will get that to you guys just as soon as we can. And I'm just excited about, future episodes, future installments of Taller Talk. I mean, I think this is a great way to really get to know an artist's background and their story, where they came from, what motivates them and where they're going. And so I think this was a very successful first episode, and I just wanted to thank you guys. Special thanks to Elise Gonzalez as well over at Ruby City, and of course the director of Ruby City, Elise Gonzalez, and of course also the executive director for the Carver is Cassandra Parker Nowicki, my boss. I think she's watching now. And of course, thanks to you guys too. Thank you, Kelly, so much for helping us field those questions, move through the technical aspects of the show. And then last but not least, Barbara, thank you so much. How cool is it to be able to get that insider's look into your space and what makes you tick and what you've got, your materials that you've got working in your taller. And I just can't thank you enough. I think it was a great opportunity for everyone involved.
Yeah, thank you so much. And shout out to my family from Mexico who tuned in. Thank you. And thank you, Kelly and Ernie. It was a lovely evening.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that we have this recorded, so we'll be able to continue to share it. If anybody has watched this evening, you're welcome to share it with friends and family, but we should have it posted very soon on Facebook or YouTube.
We'll get it out there to you guys. Thank you so much.
Good night. Thank you. Good night, y'all.
Bye.